I'd already agreed to be part of it. Clint took one look and said, "She's trying to sneak you in sideways." I nodded. This wasn't just about territory. It was about control. Karen wanted me boxed in, regulated, silenced by the same rules that had let her turn her neighbors into subjects. I circled the date on the calendar. That board meeting would be my stage. I was going to walk in, not to argue or defend myself, but to pull the curtain back on every twisted trick she'd tried. I had copies of every document, every false complaint, every map showing my exemption. And I wasn't going alone. Clint and Macy were coming too. It was time to turn this HOA circus into a rodeo, and I'd make sure the whole board got front row seats. The day of the HOA board meeting arrived hotter than usual, the kind of dry, clinging heat that makes tempers flare and patience disappear. I didn't wear anything special, just a clean pair of jeans, boots, and a button-up that didn't smell like cattle feed. Clint wore a BLO tie just to mess with the occasion, and Macy brought a batch of cookies, as if we were heading to a church bake sale. We rolled up to the Oakwood Lakes Community Center in my truck, windows down, dust trailing behind us like a lazy smoke signal. The parking lot was packed with perfectly aligned cars, not a single wheel touching the lines. It was as unnatural as the scripted friendliness of a timeshare presentation. That's when I saw her. Karen. Standing at the entrance, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on like she was guarding the White House. Her jaw clenched the second she saw me. I tipped my hat. Inside, the board meeting looked more like a hostile wedding reception. Rows of chairs faced a long folding table where 5 board members sat with folders, laptops, and pitchers of lemon water. Karen took the center seat and tapped her pen like a judge about to hand down a sentence. I walked to the guest section, gave a polite nod to the others, and handed out manila envelopes to each board member. Inside each one was a copy of the deed, the HOA exclusion certificate, and a printout of the county boundary map. The mood shifted almost instantly. You could feel it in the way 3 of the 5 board members suddenly avoided eye contact with Karen. She cleared her throat and launched into a speech like she was trying to win a local election. She spoke about maintaining the integrity of our community, how outsiders must respect our standards, and how property disputes are best resolved with unity and understanding. She never said my name, but every sentence hung over me like smoke. I let her ramble until she finished with, "And now, we would like to offer the new resident a chance to speak, if he wishes." I stood slowly and walked to the front, placing a printed aerial map of the HOA border on the table in front of them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "First of all," I began, "I'm not part of your HOA. This ranch," I pointed to the large green plot on the map, "was legally excluded 5 years ago. Your former president's ex-husband filed that exclusion with the county and it was approved. Second, the accusations, complaints, drone surveillance, and unauthorized signage placed on my land all amount to harassment and property interference." Karen tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand calmly. "I haven't filed charges yet because I figured common sense might still be floating around this room. But after the last 3 weeks, I'm starting to think I gave that too much credit." I handed the chairperson a thumb drive. "Everything's documented. Every violation slip, every false complaint, video of the drone flights, and a recording of the sheriff's statement confirming my ownership." A silence settled in that was both thick and delicious. The chairperson, a mild-mannered man named Greg with a gray mustache and a twitch in his left eye, looked through the paperwork with the focus of a man reviewing an expensive divorce. Then he looked at Karen. "Did you know this property was exempt?" he asked plainly. Karen stiffened, her jaw working hard. I believed it wasn't. I had reason to believe." Greg cut her off. "You believed or you verified?" Karen didn't answer. One of the board members, a petite woman with a librarian's calm and the world's sharpest reading glasses, flipped through the document and nodded slowly. "This is legitimate. The ranch is not under our jurisdiction. We don't have any authority over it." I watched Karen's lips part, then close again, her eyes twitching as the illusion of her control collapsed like a flimsy tent in a windstorm. Clint leaned over and whispered, "I think she just swallowed her tongue." Macy offered one of her cookies to the woman next to her, who accepted it like it was a peace offering from the outside world. Greg looked back at me. "Mr. Walker, we apologize for any confusion or inconvenience. We'll ensure no further communication comes from the board to your address. We'll also remind members that our jurisdiction ends at the designated boundary." Karen stood abruptly. "I object to this," she blurted. "This is an attack on my character. This man has been hostile from the start." He made a sign threatening to cowslap people. I smiled and shrugged. Freedom of expression. And it's technically not a threat if you're just being funny. That got a laugh from at least 2 board members, which only made Karen's face darken further. She gathered her things and stormed out of the room. The moment the door slammed, it was like someone let air back into the building. The tension lifted. The meeting moved on to other matters, but I could see the damage was done. Karen's influence, once absolute, was crumbling. Her desperation had exposed her, and now the board was starting to realize she wasn't invincible. On our way out, Greg pulled me aside. "Thanks for being professional. A lot of folks wouldn't have handled this as calmly as you did." I nodded, shaking his hand. "I didn't come here to fight. Just wanted to live my life on my own land." "That's not so radical, is it?" Back at the ranch, we uncorked a bottle of cheap but decent wine and fired up the grill. Clint tossed on some ribs while Macy set out plates on the porch table. We invited a couple of folks from the town who had heard about the HOA showdown and wanted to see the infamous sign for themselves. One guy even brought a lawn chair just to sit under it and take a selfie. Word was spreading faster than fire in dry brush, and for once, it wasn't me who had to say a word. People were talking about Karen, about her obsession with control, about how the outsider had walked into her domain and turned the tables. Halfway through the barbecue, my phone buzzed. It was a video message from Brad. He was in Florida, shirtless and sunburnt, holding a margarita and grinning like he'd just won a game show. "Heard you met the dragon," he said. "Told you she'd make it dramatic. Looks like you handled it better than I ever did. Cheers to you, cowboy." I laughed and played it for the group, earning another round of applause and a few jokes about bronco riding through HOA politics. The night ended with stories, stars, and the quiet satisfaction that came from knowing I hadn't just won a battle, I'd taken back a boundary. As the guests left and the last coals died in the pit, I stood alone at the edge of the porch, watching the moonlight wash over the land. This ranch was mine. Every inch of it. Bought fair, lived proud, and now defended against the worst kind of nuisance. The kind that hid behind rules to make people small. Karen had underestimated me. She thought I'd roll over. Instead, I'd rolled in with facts and a fence line drawn not just in law, but in fire-hardened resolve. I knew she wasn't done. Women like Karen didn't surrender. They schemed. They plotted. They waited. But now she had to play on the outside. And out here, where cows roam freely and people mind their own business, that's not an easy game to win. 3 days passed without a single notice, drone, or shriek from across the fence, and for a moment I dared to believe it was over. Karen had been humiliated at the board meeting, her grip on the HOA visibly slipping through her fingers, and I thought maybe she'd do the smart thing, back down and nurse her wounded pride in silence. But people like her don't lose gracefully. They come back louder, messier, and with a vengeance powered by spite and ego. It started with something small. A batch of garbage bags mysteriously tossed onto my gravel driveway one night. Torn open just enough to scatter fast food wrappers and old receipts into the breeze. I cleaned it up without saying a word, but I knew who had done it. Then came the mailbox prank. A fake letter from the county office, folded like the real thing, claiming I owed back taxes and that the land was under review for commercial use seizure. It was a lazy forgery. The font was wrong, the wording laughable, but I kept it anyway. For evidence, Macy suggested we get ahead of whatever storm was brewing. Her idea was simple but brilliant. Host a community barbecue. Open invite. No HOA permissions requested, because we didn't need them. Just a gathering of decent folks who were tired of being dragged around by petty control. Clint was already rubbing spices on racks of ribs before I could say no. We set it for Saturday afternoon, printed out some basic flyers, and drove around town handing them out. No pressure, just good food, cold drinks, and laughter under the open sky. The whole point was to show the difference between life on this side of the line and Karen's tightly wound empire of fear and fines. Saturday rolled around hotter than a cattle brand, but by 2 o'clock the ranch was alive. Smoke curled up from the grill, kids ran through the field with juice boxes in hand, and someone brought a portable speaker that played classic rock loud enough to rattle the barn walls. Clint gave impromptu tours of the property on a tractor-trailer, and Macy's brownies disappeared in under 10 minutes. I stood by the barn, drink in hand, watching folks who barely knew each other swap stories and laugh like they'd been neighbors for years. A few HOA members even crossed the boundary, quietly slipping onto the ranch without Karen's blessing. Most of them kept their heads down, as if they were sneaking into enemy territory, but once they were in, the tension melted right off their shoulders. Brad joined the party by video call again. Someone handed me a tablet with his grinning face on full display, holding another margarita in a Florida backyard. He waved at everyone and said, "Glad you're all keeping the peace while Karen's trying to soothe the air." Everyone roared. I thought the highlight of the day was going to be Macy teaching a group of retirees how to line dance near the barn, but then the real show started. Karen arrived. She pulled up in her Lexus like she was about to inspect a crime scene. She didn't even get out at first, just sat there at the edge of the fence, windows up, sunglasses on, watching. I half expected her to reverse and leave, but no, after a minute, she opened the door and marched forward. Not with a plate or a smile, but with a clipboard in one hand and what looked like a measuring tape in the other. She was muttering to herself as she reached the edge of the field, where a group of kids had set up a beanbag toss game. She stopped, looked around at the setup, then made a beeline for me. "You are in violation of county zoning regulations," she snapped, waving the clipboard in my face. "You cannot host unauthorized events with amplified music and livestock present. There are rules." I sipped my drink and smiled. "Good to see you too, Karen. Want a burger?" Her nostrils flared. "You think this is a joke?" "This is illegal." "Only if this was HOA land," I replied. "Which it isn't. And we've got documentation if you want a refresher." She looked around as if someone might step in and take her side. But they didn't. Even the board members who had quietly attended avoided her gaze. One of them actually turned around and walked back toward the ribs. Karen's voice rose. "I'm issuing a formal complaint to the sheriff. This gathering is a nuisance, and it violates the community's moral and environmental standards." "Environmental standards?" Clint repeated with a snort. "Karen, we're surrounded by cow manure and mesquite trees. What do you think this is, a spa?" Karen turned, clearly unable to get a foothold, and walked straight toward my fence. That's when I saw her pull out a phone and start taking pictures of every little thing. The grill. The makeshift signs. A pile of hay that had been turned into a seating area. Then she did something that crossed the line. She stepped through the fence. Not over it. Through it. She cut a thin strand of the wire with a pocket tool and slipped inside like she owned the place. Everyone saw it. Conversations stopped. Even the music faltered as people turned to watch. She strutted onto the field, snapping photos, yelling into her phone, demanding immediate action from some poor soul on the other end. I didn't even have to do anything. Clint raised a brow and muttered, "Well, that's trespassing." And that's when the sheriff arrived. Delaney must have been tipped off, maybe by one of the guests or just by pure instinct, but there he was, stepping out of his cruiser at the edge of the property with his boots crunching against gravel. he walked with that slow, deliberate gait of a man who'd had enough of everyone's nonsense. Karen saw him,